Welcome, everybody. I'm happy to see many of you here. It's the second lecture in this row, Material Economics. And we had one like a couple of weeks ago with German architects. So we have like the European perspective on that topic. And now we have Michael Meredith from MOS Architects, New York here. He flew all the way from New York today to have this lecture, and tomorrow he will go back. It's kind of crazy, but he's here now, and he's having this lecture for us, just for us, and he's talking about that topic from an American New York perspective. And I already told you it might be some completely different perspective than we have here, completely different discussions than we have in Europe. I mean, you all.
Is it that different?
We'll see. We'll see. I'm curious. You have to show us.
I think everybody still thinks of the U.S. scene as a kind of still like it's run by Peter Eisman. Like that. I think that's what everybody thinks. It's
no,
it's
but
really
that's,
not.
I watched interviews with you on YouTube, and I saw what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So it will be
Is there interviews with me on YouTube?
Yes, it's an interview in SciArc.
Oh, SciArc. Yeah. Okay.
Anyhow, I think it's good for us. I mean, it's because sometimes you have the tendency, like you also in New York, to be in a bubble and to have like a discussion with the same people all over again. Yeah. So I think it's kind of refreshing to have a completely different view on the topics. Fact is, you deal with materials. That's something that interests you. Yeah. Objects in every size, from small baskets to big houses. So I think it's a very diverse work you do. I think that's always interesting. I prefer that. You write a lot, you teach, so you have like the whole package of being an architect. And I think that's, in the best case, very inspiring. And I went to your homepage and about.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, no, but I mean, there, there you're right. If given a chance between staring blankly into space or reading architects' office statements on their websites, we choose the first. They all say the same thing. We're sustainable, responsible, with budgets, experienced, award-winning. Yeah. So I think that was kind of interesting that you say we're not going to do that. And I'm very curious that what you will show us and the insights you will give us about your work. About yourself, you studied at Harvard, and you're together with your wife. It's your wife, Hilary Sample, which is MOS Architects. What's the O standing for?
It was, it used to be a dot. I mean, it was like a circle.
Okay.
And then it was hard because it just became. It was easier to type an O. Okay. But it was like, you know what I mean? Like it just became an O.
So it's MOS means Meredith and Sample.
Yeah.
That's the
we used to have some stories about the hole and the dot.
And you and your wife are both teaching. You at Princeton?
I'm at Princeton and she's at Columbia.
Exactly. So very elitist architecture school in the US. Yeah. And also very, I think, very deep into theory and about talking about architecture.
Way too much sometimes,
So, I hope, and you said you like conversations, as you showed us already. So he asks you also to interrupt. If you have something to say, to ask, please interrupt. If you don't want to say it in English, say it in German. We will translate. Do you understand German?
No, but I maybe. I mean, I can try.
Okay.
I do know some French and some Italian.
Okay.
That's not going to help. I know. I did do German as a kid, but I don't remember it. It's fine. I don't remember much. I just have like little words.
But please, let's have this conversation if you can. I think it's good.
Yeah.
And if not, we have chance at the end to ask questions.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Michael.
Thank you. I have a tendency to sort of mumble, and my voice is very monotone. So I'm just going to warn everybody beforehand. If you can't hear me, just say something.
Yeah, but it's very sonore, so it's not a problem of your voice. You just have to speak out loud. Hey.
I don't know. I think it's me.
Okay.
But they So I mean, basically, I have a couple notes here. You know, the thing about doing a lecture that is I took seriously is just a chance to rethink things to some degree, and think about what you do. And so, when asked about material ecologies, I started, and I've just been very interested recently in thinking about what's going on in architecture. And for me, there is like this real shift that's happening, and I think I see it through the lens of scale. The title I gave is, I think I would take it back now. I think it's too on the nose in a way, but the politics of scale. I think for me, the thing is that I see it in my own interest, but I also see it with students. There's just a much greater attention to smaller offices, a kind of smaller architecture. Things like, from when I was a student, and I know there's a Basel Zurich thing, so I was saying, but like Herzog and de Meuron, to me, is just not as interesting anymore as they once were. They're still amazing architects, and they're still great, but they just feel like a machine. They can produce like solid gold hits all the time. It's just like, it just sort of feels empty. And so I think that's interesting. And so what does that mean? I don't know, but there is a kind of, I went down a rabbit hole. I started writing a whole bunch of stuff. I could try it all out at the end, the beginning of it, like getting into Ruskin and William Morris and going through a whole bunch of histories of architecture. And so maybe that's the problem of academics overthinking it. So this is the office, at least part of it. We are a small office. Also, there are about, right now, there's 8 of us in the office, including Hilary and myself. So it's not big. I was just talking to a friend of mine who used to work for, let's say, I think offices used to be that size. I don't know. I think they've all grown also over time. Like, a friend of mine who worked for Moneo when he was doing the Ottawa station, and there was 4 people in the office. So like that's a very different model. Now I don't think you could do it because it's probably because we have so many emails, and there's a kind of inevitable bureaucratic system that we're all stuck in. So I'm just going to go through a series of different projects. These are not chronological, but almost. This is a school we did. I'm going to just go through quickly to just give you a sense of who we are. I don't really need to say too much probably, but this is a school in Denmark, Krabbesholm. We were lucky to get this project kind of early on. It's basically a series of studios that are part of a larger campus plan where we were trying to really focus on these spaces between. This is a house by Jorge Pardo. These are sort of traditional, almost vernacular sod roof buildings, and this is a kind of modernist art. I think it's for ceramics or something. So, but we were doing like architecture schools, the architecture program, the photography, graphic design, I think. It's very, I think the budget we were given was like equivalent to doing an industrial building essentially. And we just basically followed the material palettes of kind of nearby industrial buildings. These are all cement panels. The only thing we did was we used these channels, these hat channels. I don't know how that translates, between the panels, which are polished stainless, so they kind of glisten in a funny way when you move around them. And then we really focused on these spaces, and we pushed, like made them, or asked them to put all these chairs and tables in these connecting spaces outside. I'll go faster. This is a guest house visitor center for a piece of land art in Las Vegas, New Mexico. It's done with SIPs. This is an early project as well. they're all small scales. I think I give everything in square footages, which might not, you just take the 0 off, I guess, and think of it as square meters at the end. So 150 square meters. But these are done with SIP panels, very kind of prefab construction, totally off the grid. Things like, you know, in terms of a material ecology, we found all the shingles like online that somebody was selling them for $1 a shingle or less. I forget what they were. They're all aluminum. And then there is like a piece of like expanded backing, so air can flow between it. And so these are continuous aluminum. So it means that, like for instance, when it's a heat sink, like a client used to say it's like a Mac computer. Like the heat would go here, but it's in shade over here, so the heat would dissipate over the surface, et cetera. And things like using the underside as a cool air mass. So there is a vent here that pulls up to allow for this to work as passive cooling. It's not real, yeah.
When you say you found them online, the panels.
We literally were just Googling, like trying to find cheapest.
Is it reuse or what?
We found it, no, it was this person who still made shingles in Oregon. And a lot of times it's just like finding the right people. And it was just somebody who was selling these shingles, like they were selling them cheap. They had a, it wasn't even let's say an ethical decision of reuse, like at that time. I mean, this is 2008 or something. I don't think the markets were crashing, everything was falling apart. And at the same time, just to give a sense of what the office is like, we are always, and this may come across as strange it's strange even in the US context, maybe, but we always are playing around. So early on we were making a lot of videos. These are videos, were eventually collected into museums and stuff, but like we made these for the client. The client was like, what are you doing? But you know, we would make models, we would write little stories. This is a story about a husband and wife architecture office. A lot of the stories are us playing with ourselves and our own mythologies. So it's like about this one, they're all done with stop motion also. They're all photographed of the model. And so this is a kind of machismo guy who's like very expressionistic, and the partner is, she is interested in the city and history and ecology and stuff like this, and it's like these two competing world views of architecture, they're working together. And there's all these little jokes about, you know, like something, there's stuff like quotes, let me see, when there's like things about John Cage references, there's Cool House references, there's just a bunch of little jokes in here, like that's a John Cage silence piece. And it's really a movie that it's like nothing. It just it stops and starts, and there's like, yeah, was interested in Rancière at some point early on, but anyways. This is low res for our website, but anyways, I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can see it. This was one of the other schemes there was 2 schemes presented for that project. This one was just this really long one. It's like super long version. They wanted something to do with growth for some reason, and that was something we just had to work with, so we had to. This is a project for a design gallery in New York. It is at the base of actually Neil Denari building, under the High Line or next to the High Line. And it's just this weird leftover space. So it was like, it just really is about we had to find this system of what do you call them? The gypsum board company that does all the, like Georgia, whatever, the Pacific. They did like a specific, Georgia Pacific did a specific kind of way to do vaults, a kind of system. So we had to work with it and try to fit it between every bit of ductwork or structure as much as we could to just reclaim as much space. So that is the project, really. I mean, it's like most galleries are just like ceiling and floor and lighting. But I would say the thing that was interesting about this was it really, for us, we're always learning also from the work and the projects and the people we work with. So like early, I didn't show some of the early stuff, like the video stuff. We worked early on also with artist Pierre Huyghe doing some projects, and Pierre is a video artist, so some of that stuff really affected us, I think. In this particular case, this is with a guy who's a design gallery, and so we started just thinking about, I think, design at a different scale, really trying to just make more stuff. So we made all the furniture, all the pieces. We did all the perforated, it's all perforated aluminum. We did the, let me see. We did these walls that were made out of, we milled the AutoCAD hatch of marble in our drawings onto the real marble. And then we made this kind of peg system that you could unscrew and put shelves wherever you wanted for display. And we were doing a lot. I think this was really the beginning of also really making a lot of the parts. Like we worked with, I don't know if you guys would even know this, SolidWorks. So we work with a lot of SolidWorks, and it has very good metal bending capacities, and we've flattened all the pieces, and we are basically work as fabricators more and more on our projects. Wouldn't do it like that now, but anyways, you can see it's all made. I mean, all these things were made. Like we had a custom mill or make all the screws, etc. And this is slightly after that. It's a house. It's taking like it's a house with a courtyard, a garden at the center, and then it's a series of, they're all basically the same volume, same framing, kind of intersecting. These are some models. We do a lot of models in aluminum and paper, basically, for some reason, to extremes. But, and there's things like this, like we're, thinking about, like, it doesn't really matter, but like we were thinking about like Gordon Matta Clark splitting, house splitting, also thinking about on the inside of the Venturi mom's house. Like there's certain things of houses that we were trying to take in. Frank Lloyd Wright's houses, thinking about this relationship of the roof to the spaces, et cetera, and there's stuff in here that I could get into, like, really thinking about how to throw off a symmetrical thing, because essentially it's a symmetrical object with this, and then this little tiny curve that throws in a die. Anyways, there was like little games like that are what architects do. The floor hatches, like being obsessed with, there's a whole thing on Kenneth Frampton writing about New York 5 and how they misuse or use the floor hatch to like destabilize space, actually, which is this little known segment he writes, which is, I thought was interesting. We had done another house, which I'm not showing, which is actually has a similar tectonic in the same area. So we knew how to do this.
This is a private house?
Private house.
In the forest?
In upstate, yeah. We've done a few houses for artists, and I know it's not in, I'm sure there's questions with that. I'll show some social housing too. So, But same kind of thing. This is like, we've had some lucky clients like where they let us, and these are not expensive, by the way, like projects in general, they're very cheap in terms of cost. But but because we do a lot of things ourselves to probably help offset the costs. So like all the cabinetry is stuff we made. All the furniture is stuff we made. So, and this led to a whole bunch of other things, like we were doing these things and then, anyways, Monero, at the same time as doing architecture in the office, we are making books. So there's other things like, they're all connected to other things that are not here. So, but it's like, here, let me see if I can scrub this a little bit for you. But we were really interested in, we had done these big books for Venice Biennale, and they were all based off of Richard Scarry, who does children's books. And so we have a Richard Scarry, they're actually great architecture books, you know. I think he lived in didn't he live in like he lived in Switzerland. He moved from the
You really see the traces in all of the books.
Yeah.
Like the way railway station looks like and stuff.
Yeah, it's all there's a lot of Swiss like
Not the Swiss elements.
and so and they're really they're actually great for learning how to do architecture. Yeah. So they saw those books that we did, and they suggested we do a children's book with them. So we did a children's book on houses. The story is like, it's a couple who wants to buy a house, but they can't find one. They end up building one, and then they build it, and then they end up selling it, and it starts over again. It's sort of like this kind of. Most of our narratives are really not narratives at all. They don't go anywhere, for the most part. They always end badly. The other things we were doing in the office, just to give a sense of. The things we do, we were doing a lot of software early on, using video game physics to do form finding. So there was like a sense of, these now are so easy to do and just super simple things. But at the time when we were doing this stuff, we started in 2005 doing this, 2008 really when we started going. So we've been doing them for a long time. But working with processing, which is an open source, sort of basically Java-based coding environment, and then taking video game physics and just doing form finding. So it was sort of like, for us, if like Fry Otto was into video games, and if you didn't have to, it really blurred the thing between real and fake to some degree, and we were interested in this space. I think. So we were doing this to do projects, and then we would get projects, and then we'd have to do, sometimes projects require you to do something quickly, and we would take, the software was a kind of research, and we would use that to, this was for something called the Design District in Miami. We did these, had to do facades for them, for these stores. This is. It seems, it's not quite as direct as like going from the software to this, but it's pretty it's close, and it gives us a kind of, you know, you have to do it, then you have to like kind of tweak it and make sure everything works with the structure and everything. And this is still stuff we still do today on and off between things. When like projects slow down or there's spaces, we end up playing around again. So this is similar kind of thing. This is using, calling these drop figures, or like heavy Velcroed, like high friction objects that just sort of pile up. And why do this? I don't know. I think like it's like for us just to look at things differently, and you know, things come up from it. Like this is a show that's up right now in New York, and we were asked to do prints, so we just used the stuff that we had around, like that we're playing with, to make prints. This is a project for, we were asked to be part of an exhibition at the Guggenheim Bilbao architecture exhibition, and they wanted to do, I don't know how we ended up doing this, but we try to do a tent that blocks out your cell phone signals. We worked with Stoll, who does CNC knitting, and with this yarn called Shieldex. It's a German yarn, and which is basically metallicized yarn, and it produces like a Faraday cage. So it was called Tent Without a Signal. So it was like doing this tent, and then you'd go in and you couldn't get your phone messages. Yeah, the other tests, actually it's out of order. But anyways, like we were doing all these, constantly just making things, and like with the CNC knitting, which is amazing, we still haven't like used it to its fullest. I would love to just do more CNC knitting. You have to learn a different way of actually drawing and coding. It's like punch cards more. It's like old school punch card technology to actually get it to work, but it's done visually instead of with cards.
Do you do this kind of stuff in your universities, or you have like a partner?
We do some of it, yeah. We used to do more. Like for the early stuff with processing, I'd have to say we had one guy. At that time I was teaching at Harvard as a young faculty member when we first started, and there was a guy. I happened to meet a guy who dropped out of MIT. This funny, who I really liked, William. He was like this funny hippie. He used to just sit in my office with a big jar of peanut butter and a spoon, and we'd be coding. And I learned from him, and it sort of becomes a thing. So it would just happenstance. I knew the guys a little bit from who wrote the software, because MIT was right up the street, and I was interested in it when I was a student, even when it was going on. And I had actually, not so much anymore, but advice to students would be just start emailing people. If you're interested in something, just say, I really am interested in what you're doing. I think it's amazing. I mean, it sounds a little weird, but that's what I would do. I'd be like, I think this is amazing, the software you guys are working on. I really want to figure out how to use it. And so they were helpful. Nobody was like telling them that at the time. It was early compliments. Compliment early. And then, it helps.
And then the processing was in an industrial kind of way.
It became its own thing, and it became it's still open source, but everybody sort of has some version of it now, basically. There's Java kind of can do it. It's like C#. Like there's languages that it's all kind of combining together. So, but there used to be more of that in schools. Like schools, I have gone through shifts in terms of technology over the years. Like you used to have to script and code before Grasshopper. To do a lot of the things that Grasshopper does easily. So you don't learn, even like milling, the CNC thing. I used to, when I was a student, I had to write G code. Does anybody write G code anymore? Like you had to get a CNC mill to work, you had to know how to code. Now it's all hidden behind other stuff, and so you don't really need to know it. It's not necessarily good or bad, it's just different. These are other projects, things of like book projects that we're doing. So this is something we did for a Biennale that turned into something else. But we just literally went through and just collected scale figures that architects were using in their drawings. And so it was just to talk about who is being represented in architectural drawings. That was it. It was a very simple idea. Kind of, for us it was political, but it's also kind of fun. We were making fun of people. It was amazing how much, let me see if I can find. We just went for as much as we could. Do we have it was actually interesting to find someone like Bjorky Ingalls. He just put himself in every one of his drawings. So we were just collecting stuff like this. So the other thing, this is a show we did at Minera in Brussels. These are these small scale objects, basically. Or in general, I would say we try to work with few parts, like this, and then finding certain things. Like these pegs were the largest that a broom, someone who made broomsticks could do. So we just found a broomstick manufacturer, and the biggest one they could do, we used it for the legs and the back. Baskets. This was a lot of work to get these, to figure these out. But these lead to, and this was a show, we called it Millennial Furniture because it was based off the there is like multiple entendres, I guess, but one is millennials, I guess, but then also the other was their shaker laws, the millennial laws that shakers would use, which we were just fascinated by all these weird things that the shakers in utopian societies would come up with, for even like how to describe how to make furniture, or what furniture, how to live, and all these things. We did a custom wood stove. I mean, these were all fun. They sold some. They sold a bunch of stuff, but it's not really like you can't really, I don't know. It's not a great business strategy. These are rugs that we did recently. We're doing more. And somehow that I think it's important in our office, at least, that we have things of many scales going on at the same time. So there's always like a furniture scale going on with a housing scale, which I'll show, or some other things. This is like furniture as building, more or less. We did this in Versailles as part of it's still there in a Biennale, but it's a petite école. It's a little. We made everything because we had done the Bilbao tent structure. We made this all in Spain, actually, and just drove it to. It was super affordable. So. They use this for like children's design school, design camp, kind of as well. So we had asked a bunch of architects. We worked on then a book for it and drawing. So we asked a bunch of architects to basically design architecture exercises for children. So I don't know who we'll land on, but anyways.
What is it with this other architect?
They're the ones who like we asked them to come up with exercises for children so they could do them in this thing. So this is like, they come up with some, and we drew them and illustrated them, but they would give us a kind of exercise or a brief for the children, and then we put them in here. This scale is also, after Petite École, we've been doing these, like a lot of small buildings, I would say, or I don't know what they are, like greenhouses right now. We have a couple, greenhouses. This is one we did for another architecture biennale. It started out like that in actually in Hong Kong, and we were just doing this as it was supposed to be an outside thing, but then it got, I don't know how it all works there, but like we were doing it as a community greenhouse in a place where people could go and escape in a way and relax and be around greenery. But then it became something that got inside. But they moved it around. This is New York kind of work. This is what you get in New York as a like very typical kind of project, like just doing an apartment renovation. We did a lot of furniture also for this client. I was very happy with these funny towel bars and things. They are in a way. I don't know if you know those, like the Venturi, those chairs that they did. I just always love those chairs. They're like these, like bent plywood. Anyways, they're very much in that mode to me. Kind of like super ridiculous, but work. Just look like a flat thing, like something you'd make out of paper. We did a lot of light fixtures also and other things for the client. It was a great. It was a lot of fun, and it was like, again, probably rare to have somebody that's willing to like just do all these things. This is for a studio for an artist. He's a photographer who also does like basically models that he photographs. He's a good artist.
Did he interfere in the design?
You know, he was good. It is a problem working with artists sometimes. You know, it changed. I mean, he was neurotic. We had originally there was a barn on the premises. We originally wanted to reuse it. We added to it, and then it would just like it was just more expensive to do it in the end, so we had to redesign it. It was a process behind, you know, everything that looks like simple is probably years to like get it to work. I mean, it's just showing just the tip of the iceberg. But he was good. His name's Jim Casebeer. He was just into architecture. He would send these like long emails about his thoughts on architecture to us all the time, which was actually great. It wasn't. You know, he would tell us what he thinks it means, what we did, like, and how to situate it within how he understands architecture. So we'd get this kind of like theoretical positioning of the project in real time by a client, which is not necessarily, like, and his references are pretty limited, like dated, I would say. But he was good still.
But he didn't interfere spatially because his work is also...
No, I mean, there's not a lot spatially there, by the way. Like, I think he went along with it. Like, I think if you left it to him, like the roof is ridiculous, is in a way exaggerated. You know, he probably would have tightened it up a little bit more, but we would say, come on, you got to do the big roof. You know, like, and it wasn't really costing him anything more. And, you know, we could argue for it from things like, we usually will always say, like, listen, it will help you with, you know, heat gain on certain things, or produces a place where you can sit outside and you can use the space. So we do use, let's say, I would say, rational arguments a lot. It's not just like aesthetic, but he knows it's aesthetic too. I mean, the people are smart. They know what we're doing to some degree. But things like this was like why did we do the whole room, and the upstairs all in plywood and the downstairs not? He went along with that. We just presented it. There was, I remember there was like questions about structure, and we had to like, we had to do certain things with these knee walls that he wasn't totally excited about, but we had to do it. There's a series of projects here that we've never built that we want to do, and this is one of them, which are basically looking at expanded polystyrene foam as a structural unit to make these foam block houses. This is like more typical where you would have a metal aluminum skin on it. This kind of really lightweight, it's what's used, in the US we use this under highways. It's usually used for forming like off ramps and on ramps to highways. But it has, which means it has really great compressive strength, actually. And it has incredible, it's closed cell foam, so it's incredibly insulative. It's like building a cave. You know, we do these things and propose them to clients. Sometimes they go, sometimes they don't. These ones are ones that, we're in the section now of things that were rejected. But this also gives you a sense, so like the models, we do large scale models. They're 1/50 or 1/2 inch equals a foot for US, it's just basically similar. And which is like dollhouse size in the US. And we can photograph them, and then we use them for, that's what we used for those videos and stuff too. This one may get built still. It's a very simple, small little house for a photographer. These are so I think these are the last projects. We did some, let me see if I can, so, like, basically we were asked to work on this kind of like a social housing expo site in Pan, Mexico. We were brought in by the client is a kind of is something called Infonavit. They're a sort of semi-governmental or agency that loans construction loans to people to do affordable housing. So like each of these houses that are here have to be $6,000 to build or less. Very cheap. There's like, building in Mexico is very different too. It's not like in Switzerland or in the US. It's like CMU block. There's no layers. You know what I mean? Like I'm used to like having a credible layered system that has to deal with you know, moisture, et cetera. No, it's just like concrete block, roof. I mean, it's very direct. So their thing was to ask 32, it ended up being, it was like 50 architects to do proposals for houses, and they're houses that they had it in specific places in mind, in a way, to build them so that when people came, they could see that you can still do a lot of different things within these budgets. Some more than others. I'm sure some are slightly over the budget, but it's still ridiculously cheap. So we did this. We had this horrible political thing where we had to go in and we had to cure. We didn't ask any of the original architects, but they wanted us to tell people no and then write a reason why they were selected or not selected for every entry. Like give specific, so it was like, because it could be used as a governmental document to explain why, and then to like come up with things. So we kept all the original designs, basically everything that was oriented north. We left the same orientation that they had proposed it originally for the, and just that's why it's kind of looks like it's, you know, kind of random, but it's basically to keep the same north-south orientations that they had proposed, and then we had to come up with a kind of system of like things like, we did the education building here, which is this galleries, education, administrative offices, and then like a kind of thing for gardens or retaining walls that could also be used for collective seating, planting a bunch of trees that are hopefully grown in now, but the Laboratorio di Vivenda. Very, I could say we haven't really, I don't think we've ever, I look at a lot of our peers and friends who are architects and I feel like they've had, I don't feel like we've ever had great projects. We always get these projects that are really impossible and incredibly like broken budgets. And like I feel like in Switzerland you guys got it so much better. Like I feel like it would be so much easier here. I don't know. And the this is a housing project in affordable.
Can you say something?
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand. The other houses.
Yeah.
They're not from you.
No, they're not from us. They were all from. So it was like Tatiana Bilbao, Frida Escabeta, Productura. It's a bunch of people. Like the people that they originally selected were all great Mexican architects, like Kalach also, and then the faculty of SciArc, which was weird. So they had some SciArc connection. So it was like, so we had to be like, Hernan Diaz, sorry, you can't, I had to write why that would not, it was, and it's obvious, it's like this big thing, it looks like a big gigantic, like vegetable, growing, and then I don't know who picked them, and we were like, you can't build that here. And we also asked them, we did a book with this as part of it. So one of the things is like, as architects, we have, the client also saw some of our books and wanted us to do a book for the project as a kind of propaganda in some ways, but also as a book about the project in real time, as it's like so it's there when they open it with the ribbon cutting ceremony. And so we asked all the architects involved to pick one piece of vernacular architecture that they like and write about why. So we have these little texts from people with a little photograph of something that they collected, and so there was a kind of attitude that this was trying to construct vernaculars more than maybe architecture per se.
But it's more like an exhibition.
It's like an expo kind of thing. In the end,
Weissenhof.
Yeah, that's what we said in our text a little bit, but not. It would be better if Weissenhof is like really used. This is in a way people go there. Like some people are staying there now, but it's like people go there and they the idea is they wanted to have like people come and students come and like use it as more of an education thing to and to think about housing, affordable housing, workers. It's called it's workers housing, low income workers housing. The reality is they Infonavit does these things where you'll have the mechanisms are so insane. It's like you'll have a kilometer of one house repeated. I mean, just insane, because that's just nobody just works efficiently for the money. So they really were trying to figure out a way to come up with something else. So this is a project in DC. I'm showing this one even though I would say it's like, this is the hard part about doing affordable. This is fully 100% affordable, federally granted, formerly homeless housing. There's no market, nothing. It's pure, hardcore, affordable housing for the U.S. There are certain things that we were brought in because I think at one point there was one person in the developers team that wanted to do architecture, and so they interviewed a bunch of architects and we got the project, and then we went through everything, permitting. It was a long process, got everything, and then they fired that guy, and ended up like just destroying the material economy. What is this called? This series, Material Economies. on this project are horrible is really like, it was really about material economy to the developer. Like, I think typologically we're happy with it to some degree. It's a very strange site, but it's also like, you know, it's like we have units with cross ventilation. We have 2 courtyards in these, which is very atypical. You know, we got more units in than they thought they could. We got like 3 extra units in that they didn't think was possible because of the geometry is so bizarre. But so we were trying to leverage for larger windows even, and they said yes, and then they said no eventually. So the system is basically concentric, these 2 boxes. There's a kind of concentric logic of, you can see it around here. We used, the US also we can't do a single stair, like we have to have 2 means of egress. Like in Europe you can do 1 stair. I think up to 6 floors you can do 1 stair in here. Is that how it works here?
It really depends where you
Yeah, I know in Paris, because I'm always jealous of like the Parisian social housing. But like but here we had to just maximize the dead end corridors to be able to put the 2 units here. So and allow for the corridors, which are typical way to do it in the US is like dumbbells. So you get no natural light in your corridors. You get no ventilation. So we were happy with those basic things, but it doesn't necessarily make, I mean, yeah. I'm not that happy with it. Like the side, it's just, yeah.
What's the material of the facade?
It's just this, it was gonna be terracotta and then it ended up being some product that we then, I don't know. I don't even, it was not good, whatever it was. But like I said, I think maybe in some things you can just be happy if you shift the typological, maybe we should just find a way to be happy with that. Other things that were going on in the office that are things like research on the city, I would say, and things like this happened right before COVID and during COVID. It was a kind of COVID project. We just were mapping out vacancies and then documenting them, taking like public data and documenting like where vacancies are, and then also calling everybody out who owns it. Sorry. Like here is a good example. Like really calling out with public data, like, you know, how many days something's been vacant, who owns it, etc., and where they're located. So it's like, was this way to think about, and then at the end of the book, there's like thinking about how these, primarily it's all ground floor retail spaces that we have, and a lot of it is because they're just owned by financial instruments. So some of these are absurd, like they've been vacant for like 3,000 days or something, because they just know that it's cheaper, they can make more money just as a loss than actually renting it. And then at the end we did like kind of design studies of like how you could reuse or rethink the ground floor. And in a lot of cases it's like, I mean, it's very common in Europe, but it's less common in New York to have the ground floor with housing or the street level. So, you know, it's just looking at that stuff. This is a project that after we did the project in Mexico, and this is the last project I think, or maybe second last, is social housing in Ascension in Paraguay. It's a high profile project in some ways. We were just part of a larger list, and then eventually it went down to 4 people, and then it went to us. And then we brought in some of our friends also to work with us. But this is the site here. This is the main cathedral. This is the presidential palace. This is like the Congress. So it's like right in the heart of the country. It's a well-known site. It really is like It was a doctor's, this guy, Roberto Bruges, and he had all this land, and he just let people, he was a very devout Christian, and he let all these people come just stay on his land, basically, who couldn't find any place else to live. And then after generations, they just live there. And there's no, there's no plumbing. It's just like corrugated metal over CMUs. And the government decided, I think because it's so close to the center of the city, to provide social housing for everybody who lives there. So everybody who's there gets a house. Generations get a house. They were all documented, and they were all, very specific. We got very specific information, like so-and-so can't go up a flight of stairs. So-and-so has a heart condition. So-and-so has to be next to their daughter. So-and-so has, so you got these crazy spreadsheets, really intense spreadsheets with also lists of kind of humanity. And we had to work it out. And the sites themselves are very bizarre sites, as you can see. It's sort of like CISA by default. But it's like just because the site is does it for you. And so the way it works is the ground floor, there's basically ground floor apartments that are specific to the site with courtyards for food production and air. There's no common spaces except for the street. The streets, so you enter off the streets, and then the towers are also a unit, and they have a separate entrance. But the towers are repeated. Sometimes they're if they have a larger family of 8 or 9 people, they need a double tower. But basically, that's the structure. So it's like a tower on top, and they have exterior space on the roof terraces of the other apartments, and also the roof of the tower. We had to go through, it was a real desire to be sustainable. The site is also is a ravine. It's it's a kind of extreme topography. One of the things that was cool from just a purely architectural point of view is we thought it was the most high-tech experience we've ever had in architecture, in the sense that all of the surveying, it's probably very common here, but it wasn't for us, it was done with drones and scanned at a high resolution. So we got these crazy scanned sites to work with, which we had never dealt with before, and we were surprised because we thought, that would not be the case. So, so then we were using them for drawings and things too. Basically, we started off also doing things like compressed earthen blocks, but eventually it became brick, because the soil is kind of amazing. It's like this really red soil. This is under construction right now. I think I have one little photo.
How come they haven't chosen one of the 4 as well? How come that you do all of these?
Oh, you mean all of these? What do you mean?
All these units.
Right, there were 4 teams involved till.
Oh no, we worked together. So it was so it was we were hired for it, and technically it's underneath our name for some reason. But we brought in Adamo Faden and also Equipo de Arquitectura, and Equipo's local. They're meeting with people. Adamo we just have a long relationship with, and we have one. Actually, we have a winery we're doing with them too. I think it might be in here. But and so when we do those projects, we deal with them we don't do executive architect and design architects structures. We just treat it as a collaborative. We split the money equally, and I mean, even if technically contractually it's under us, I think in some ways it's probably easier to sue them. They're closer, but I don't know. We just try to split everything equally, because we have been in situations where we've worked with others, and usually if you have to negotiate that much over the money. Just ruins everything. Money ruins everything in general, but for sure it ruins like relationships with architects. So we just try to keep it simple. So I would say it's not collaborative in the sense of like, okay, we did this and they did that. It's like we all sit around the table, we throw things out, we draw, we respond to each other. We share we have one Google Drive we all share that everything is in. If you want to know the nuts and bolts of it. Models. That's it as it's going up. They did change things too, but it's fine. This is a winery that we're doing also with them.
Michael, could you talk a little bit about the bricks? You talked about the earth, the local earth is...
They ended up being brick. They're locally produced, but they're not what we wanted to do them as really compressed earthen blocks. But structurally, they weren't strong enough structurally. So and it was somehow the engineers said we couldn't do it in the end. So they ended up going with standard masonry. We tried, we pushed for it. Also, it was more expensive, and I mean, this is a winery in Mendoza. It's basically within the landscape of this little valley. Then we fill it in, and it just ends up. It's just going to be it's almost like a land art project to some degree. But you can go in and out, walk around it, on top of it. You move around into it. Again, I wanted to end on a small one. This is another greenhouse because yeah. I have others. I mean, I don't know what you guys. Like I've written a whole bunch of stuff. I was going to try to show. I wrote a whole thing on like smaller architecture. This gives you just. I'm not going to go into it all, but like really trying to think about material ecologies, but also trying to think about how I understand architecture at the moment. Like if anything, I think a lot of these things and that we're doing is trying to. You're working within you're doing your work, but you're also trying to think about the context of which you're working within constantly. And I think that's the problem of an academic architect to some degree, that, we come from. So we are, I do think at the moment, I just think scale is probably, where we are at, I don't think it's necessarily the same here, is like there is a real concern about politics and justice in certain ways that I think architecture can't really address directly. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. But I think it can address things like there is a question of politics and justice through scale, and I can understand it through scale, that question. But I can't really understand it just in terms of architecture's agency. I don't really understand it. But I think there is a problem when, and it's a problem of maybe capitalism to some degree too. It's if it just grows and becomes huge, and architecture becomes huge, and everything is like, the whole thing was like taking this little bit of a Robin Evans quote that I stumbled upon from translations of Drawings to Buildings, where he says, I just read the first paragraph or something, then we can do questions. It's a polemic thing about this. If architecture were redefined in this way, and this is me quoting it from a different section, with the intimacy of someone's work, a creative practice, something crafted by people, not as an instrument of political, social, economic order, it might become more scrupulous, less responsible, smaller, and less predictable, worth less, but better, as the hope would be, that in giving up the grandiose pretensions to represent and define the social world in both its imaginative and active aspects, a project the unlikelihood of which is comparable to the unlikelihood of compiling a legal code that is also a good novel, an ambition that can only be confounded in practice, architecture may, by contraction and concentration, constitute itself anew. And so, and also it's a text that's like playing with language a little bit. So it's like, anyways, it sort of thinks about like what if architecture went a different way, and it sort of talks about bigness, and I would say the kind of corporateness of everything at the moment, and even the desire for everyone to look like big offices. I mean, I'm paraphrasing stuff, but even for us, even like the generic type names, the strange, like everyone wanting to look like a big corporate office in a way, maybe that was not the right way to go, ultimately. Like, maybe we should have tried to think about architecture and reframe architecture in a different way where it can become more more authored and personal and more diverse. And the thing which is like, if we, like more smaller offices instead of like these big offices, like I was saying, like that try to do everything, that try to be everything for everybody, like try to absorb diversity, et cetera, into them, as opposed to like letting diversity be about many voices, different voices. So that was the thinking at the time. Like that's what that was response to material ecologies, like thinking about that stuff. Anyways, it's not done yet, but it will turn into something eventually once and then like going and reading all these lectures by William Moore. I mean, it just turned into like this rabbit hole of thinking. All right, thanks. I'm happy to ask any questions or like whatever.
I've got a question. Yeah. Firstly, thank you very much for the presentation and for flying out for this presentation. That's huge. And my question sort of goes a little bit into to understand your design process, and specifically in terms of constraints. So you've had there's quite a range of projects, and you talked about some that were very limited with budget, very restrictive, and others where maybe for the artists where you had a sort of carte blanche, you had everything open. And
no, they're all restrictive.
Okay. Yeah.
But we've never had a good. I feel that's why I said I feel like I'm showing just like junk, almost, or whatever you want to call it, like just stuff we've tried to make into something. But we've never had a client go, we really want you to do your thing. You know, they're always like, well, we only got this much money, and, you know, we need this. And then, you know, same problem. It's like just trying to make it into something when the brief is like not. We've never had an institutional, like I think institutional clients, you get that, no? Maybe?
Yeah,
no.
But a lot of architects talk about the constraints as being like a real sort of impetus for creativity. And so that's kind of where my question was going. So if you feel these kind of restrictions, I mean, I was particularly interested in this, was it Paraguay? Where you had these very, you know, limited and unusual sites.
There was a fight for that to do also. So like the sites, I will say that even housing, especially housing, has a very clear aesthetic to most people. So like the Ministry of Housing, a lot of the arguments and discussions, which maybe are interesting, like they really wanted unité blocks. Like they were like, this is a lot easier to build, and you know, we can repeat this over and over again. And we were like, no. And we had to fight to not do that, and explain why, and show in specific cases how you couldn't really do it, and the problems it would produce with, you know, even ecologically with the landscaping after a while, like the size of the retaining walls you would need and stuff. So it was like we had to make all those cases. So there is maybe constraints by working within the site, but we just thought it was better. I mean, in some ways, urbanistically, I think we're pretty. We like traditional pedestrian cities, you know. Like it's not like, it's probably not the right. It's not the radical thing to say, but it's like we like, you know, strange architecture maybe to some degree, but we like cities that are pretty conventional, like human scale, walkable. Like, and so it produces a kind of, we thought, produced this beautiful urban condition in a way, like a kind of, you know, like a town on a hill, kind of beautiful walking around and having the tower, but at the same time very modern, like the tower repetitive, the base not. It sort of was a hybrid for us. We were thinking about, I don't know.
So which factor defined the size of the plots, those unusual plots where the existing favela outlines? Is it triangle topography or?
They gave us the sizes.
Oh,
they gave us like literally, and we tried to work within it. They gave us outlines that they said was buildable, and a lot of that was negotiated with the people who live there, and so there was.
You were talking about the spreadsheets, and I was wondering, you know, with your experience in coding and programming, to use some kind of AI aid to, you know.
I wish. The towers, by the way, I think you should know is like they're small. They're not like typical. They're 3.5 meters.
Sure. No, it's like
they're like little. They're not towers. They're like little.
I understand. I was just thinking about the floor plans and kind of in the logic of your experiments.
Yeah.
With the falling depth.
3.5 meter squares. Sorry. Yeah. Like in plan. So like. They're not big.
Like in Italy, in the old.
Yeah, it's like it's a little bit. Yeah, that's what we talked about too internally.
Do you know the project from Keretz? He did also something like that in where was it?
Somebody, yes,
São Paulo, I think.
Yeah, I know what you're talking.
It looked more like favela style because they used the bricks and they wanted to have that self-made looking style from the bricks, but yours looks like actually very not so affordable. I mean, just the look. I mean, I know.
That's nice.
Looks very nice.
I hope it turns out like where it looks like it can last for a while in the city. But I don't. It is. I can give you numbers. I have to dig them up, but it's like it's very low. I mean, but it's also a different labor force, and it's a different. Everything's different.
Other questions?
Yeah.
You mentioned context as a kind of first thing when you just before finishing or just after finishing the lecture, but you used it in a kind of different way than we would probably most likely use it here in the studio, because you used it as a kind of a very large scale context, in kind of which socio-economical, political kind of sense. But also in your projects, you've shown only the moment you left the US, I think it was the first time that you could see something which was not just a bit of green outside the house.
Yeah.
How come? Why is the US blended out?
Well, I mean, the thing is, like, we just haven't had those projects that are literally in the US, we've had mostly interiors or freestanding houses. The housing even was a site that is just going to change radically. I mean, the neighbors are small, and they're all getting. It's just that whole area of the city is being rebuilt right now. So yeah, I think I could see that as a critique too. Like for me, I was thinking like the drawings even don't really. I mean, they focus on the objectness of them. Yeah, and I think. Yeah, I mean that's just the way that I would say it's not as like that we aren't thinking about the context. I think we also might have thought they looked better as drawings, like also in terms of how you these are drawings that also exist like on the internet, and like how do you frame or crop a drawing? It's almost easier to or something just to say this is what we worked on, this part of this object in a way, or thinking about the building in the same way as we sort of trying to draw parallels between all the different things that we do. But they're not the same. I mean, like you have to do certain things with different, I mean, you just have to as an architect. Like even the very first project, I mean, we had to work with Danish energy codes. We couldn't, so it's like 80 centimeter walls or something like of insulation. It's like crazy, they're crazily insulated. And so, we wouldn't do that we didn't do that in Mexico, for instance, but like there's no insulation in some cases there. There's literally none.
Yeah, but I have to pick up on the point. I think it's a really good point. So the images are really seductive, like the little graphics, they're really seductive, and but it really felt like it was these are isolated objects. It's kind of very provocative to say we've stripped the context away from it. So that was
it's like whatever you do, we do the same thing, or we're preparing a monography from the day one. Sorry, I'm making
yeah. I don't. No, I think it's fair.
But I think it was for me. Your last statement was very giving really food for thought, I think, for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And I think it's super fascinating to see this kind of development of architecture on a kind of macro scale. And I think it's super fascinating to hear it from someone whose office is in MOS.
Yeah, I was
who does like everything kind of in this Bruce Mau aesthetics with research. And
that's
stuff.
interesting.
So I have to say, for me, it was very.
It's a bit of self-criticism. Yeah, like this, the thing of like, even in the text, which I could send you guys if you want, it's like there's a lot of like making fun of this desire for, to become, it's a post-OMA thing, perhaps to some degree, to playing with this idea of the bigness and the generic and everything. And basically it's also our peers. It's like a lot of us, I think we all come out of this and then just starting to reflect on that a little bit at the moment.
Well, that's why I found it really so touching, because it's come from big offices.
Yeah. Also, we are, I can't really overstate, we are really not we are a very small little office ultimately. I mean, I'm showing you years of our lives, but it's like we're not going to be that. Even when I just was over at Oliver and Thomas's office this morning, and like they're getting to be huge. They're going to be huge, and I was like, you guys got to really be careful. Like, don't get too big. Like, I don't know. I think I get worried about the like the ambitions of architects sometimes. I just got to keep it in check. It's like, I do think it's more interesting right now, small, for whatever reason, like I was saying, like, Herzog and Murano, who I love, and I still think they were great architects, I just think they are so uninteresting for some reason. And why is that? Like, maybe it's not the same for everybody, and I hope it's not, but it's like, I don't care what they do, because it just seems like bureaucratic machinery. And you might see novelty, and it's like amazing, and it's well done, like, oh, I can't believe they did that, and stuff. It just feels so depersonalized, and I think something about scale, inevitably, you can't, it just takes over. Like, you lose, I've had many friends also who are very good architects say they hire a business person to come to their office, and they say the first thing you have to do to become successful is like remove yourself from the process. Like, you have to become a system where you're not required to be there. Like, that's like how you become successful as an architect. And it's like, who the hell wants that? Like, they did it, and they do it, and they're growing, and they're doing great. They're getting all this work. But like, I only got into architecture because we were like weird people who like to make stuff and like play and like think about the world, and like, that is like, I never got into architecture to have a business. Like, I don't care. Yeah. But I think everybody is so business minded at the moment. It's just like crazy to me.
How would you position yourself within the architecture scene in New York City?
We've stopped doing a lot of stuff, but we have friends, and I like architects. I genuinely like architects, and like, so it's like we have a kind of group that we hang out with. Like, I would say Florian and Jing and Work AC and like, there's a certain group of us that we actually even have. We used to get together in the summers and have camp and stuff. So. And so some of this also is thinking about that stuff to some degree, is like thinking about, it's just self-reflection at the moment of like what's going on and what I see. So I think for us, we are still weird in the sense that we don't, like, nobody else has their office, basically in their house. Like, and everybody is always like horrified. They're like, why, you know, there's no separation. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no separation anyways. I just bring it home with me if I wasn't. So it's like, so I think we're odd in that regard, and we run things a little bit, you know, differently because of it. I mean, we can all, you know, sit and eat, like, but again, like the thing with the, going back, like, I don't think it's that, I think it was probably more like that at one point. Like, that's why the thing with my, like when I was talking to like Stan Allen, who worked for Mineo, Stan was saying, you know, it was Mineo lived upstairs, the office was downstairs. Even Mineo, I was like, Mineo? And like, and you know, it was like 3 or 4 people, he said, doing that project, this huge project. And I just was like, what? And he was like, yeah, and he worked, when he worked for Richard Meyer before that, it was 18 to 20 people, he said, and that was when Meyer was doing like the High Museum, something, Frankfurt, like he was doing all these big projects at that time.
They had like 7 drawings for a project, and now we have 300 for it.
Yeah, is that what you think? It's just it's just the bureaucratic machinery.
Partially,
yeah.
I guess. I mean, it's like you have a sheet, you sit down, and you do your project.
I think it's also just, okay, this is good, but like I think it's also just about communication. I think it's now we're expected to communicate a lot more. So half your day, if not more, is just communicating. Like I spend so much time writing. I'm like a writer who also does architecture half the time. Because I'm just like sending emails, or I'm writing responses, or I'm doing whatever. It's like, I think it's just that you don't have that time anymore to yourself. And also we're inundated with like whatever. I'm like here, I'm like checking the election stuff going on. Like, you know what I mean? Like you can't escape anything anymore. And I think we're so inefficient with our time. Or whatever it is. Maybe it's better, maybe it's great, I don't know. But it's like, you know, that's why we lose it. Everyone now has these crazy bureaucratic, like we need to have bureaucratic systems to help us manage the inefficiency created by technology.
What about as the building technologies change? It requires more planning effort, right? If you work with CLT, you've got to draw every single wall, you know, that goes. It's been cut out.
You don't use like Revit or
like yeah, well, you can, but still, before that you would just say this is a wall and it's made out of brick and go, guys, and just.
Yeah, there was a better. Yeah,
so
that's right.
So
yeah.
the craftsmanship was kind of like on a much higher level, and the techniques were simpler. So basically, the increase of the size of the offices is not just the bureaucratic factor that Boris was mentioning, but also the complexity of the process, I believe.
Yeah.
Quickly about it comes back to the context later, but the words and writing. And the kind of, maybe the critique you also had over GSD and MIT, I think in the beginning there's kind of quite heavy thinking, theory heavy. And I was wondering whether this comes close to back to the context again, that also how you explained now the first houses, they were quite idea heavy and kind of reference heavy from things that one's got to know to to understand your project, rather than, there's a big stone here, so I stay away from the stone, I can see the tree, or, you know.
No, but my brain is still like I would say, like if you read the writing on these things, even I will throw out like a ton of references. Stuff. So it's like, just how I'm talking about it is different. Like I am a child of like a certain period of time, like everybody, and like when I graduated, for instance, I had done, when I graduated from GSD, 2000 was when I graduated. I got a fellowship to go to Chinati in Marfa. And so I lived in Marfa for months. And when I was there, David Foster Wallace was there. And so David Foster Wallace and I became friends. We were writing, sending postcards to each other afterwards even. So I would say these are, and then I was surrounded by people who, McSweeney's. I mean, like, it means nothing to a younger generation, by the way, I think, which is fine, it's good. So I was surrounded by a certain kind of thing, and for sure it affected me. Like I said, I'm very much like affected by everybody we work with, I think, that we come in contact with. It's not like I'm, like Pierre Huyghe affected us, Foster Wallace affected us, Donald Faden affects us. now, or whoever, anybody we work with, anybody. It's going to become something that you take in and think about, and I'm okay with that. I mean, at the same time, the thing is, like, how to do that, to be a person in the world, you know, experiencing things and thinking about it and trying to be thoughtful, but also maintaining a kind of body of work. That's the trick in our office that we talk about. It's like, so how do you, like Hilary and I are like, you know, you have to, we feel like we have to have some stewardship over making sure that there's, like, it feels like a body of work in the end, somehow, which is a different problem. That's not, it's like throwing a wrench at the end of some other whole conversation we could have, but, like, you know, that's a, yeah.
I really enjoyed the project that you've shown, and I think one thing I would like to take with me from this, and I want to ask you about, is that you made it look easy. I mean, of course you said it was hard work, but I like the kind of really the generosity and the simplicity that the things have. Although they're complex in shape. I wonder whether it's a question even in the end. No, but how do you do that it looks simple?
I like that. It's a nice. That's like more of like a compliment to me. But like I think that's what there is we do try to have a tone to it or something. I don't know what that is, but a playfulness or Stan, again, like Stan, as Alan says to us, that we have perfected the casual. And I've always thought that was nice, as a compliment. Like, somehow the work seems casual. And even though, at the same time, it's, you know, we are fully aware of, I think, not fully, you can't ever be fully aware, but we are also aware of like the baskets. We know, like, Gary's chairs and stuff like this, and we know we're playing with certain things that he was doing in wood, and we're doing them in metal, and we're trying to play with certain, we know there's certain things that for us, that are in the world of architecture and design that we're swimming in, and that are affecting us, but you know, you don't have to, yeah. It's not like it's like the main thing to talk about, maybe, always. Yeah.
Okay. If there aren't any more questions, then thank you very much.
Thank you.